We do not care.
Welcome to the third official episode of the We Do Not Care podcast. We're fresh off the wildcard loss, which was definitely tough to see. To start with, breaking news. Steelers owner Art Rooney, he's finally awakened from his decade-long slumber. The malpractice that occurred during his hibernation is comparable, arguably, to none. Michael Petaway, Tomlin, thank you for your 19-year run. Seeing Schefter break the news, I felt like a little boy on Christmas again. The purgatory has ended. Obviously, that being said, I'm appreciative of Coach T's efforts in his 19 consecutive non-losing seasons just to get absolutely bounced round one repeatedly. I don't know if you have any thoughts on Tomlin to start.
I think I might be a little less critical than some of our other fans have been. Obviously, it's a tough situation. Grateful to Coach T for everything he's done for the team, the work he's put in. Obviously, he's the epitome of a player's coach, and all those surveys that come out every year of who would you like to play for? Almost every year, everyone votes Mike Tomlin as the coach they like to play for most, even guys that aren't on the Steelers. So obviously tough to see him go. As I said with the John Harbaugh firing, even if someone's great, sometimes at the very end, and to reiterate what Adam Schefter has said repeatedly, but sometimes it just calls for a change. And Tomlin had a great run with the Steelers, but I do think it was time for a change. We'll have to see what this next chapter holds for the Steelers, but I do think it was time. And, regardless of if we end up having to trade him because he takes another job, or if, he's just done, I definitely respect him. And, different from Harbaugh, I don't think anyone was ever really looking at this as we were going to fire him. I think it was always going to be a kind of mutual agreement. So clearly that's what went down with him and the ownership. And obviously wish him all the best. I'm grateful for everything he's done, but still hasn't even really hit yet to think that next year, Mike Tomlin will not be the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, the whole AFC North is going to be different. Taylor's still in Cincinnati, but Stefanski's out, Tomlin's out, Harbaugh's out. Definitely going to miss Coach T. Some great moments, some tough losses at the same time, though. But yeah, I appreciate everything he's done, obviously, for the city of Pittsburgh, bringing them that Super Bowl against the Cardinals. Looking onto the game, I really think the defense played their hearts out. They really did. They won in the turnover battle. Black got the interception. Jack Sawyer forced that fumble on that. Eccles had a pick. I feel like everyone was pretty on it, except for a couple players, including TJ Watt. I have a lot of thoughts on him getting paid $41 million dollars per year now. On the wrong side of 30, it's just not enough. He just hasn't shown that. He's not as impactful. He's not moving around as much. The scheming just isn't good enough. He's seemingly fallen off harder than Chase Claypool, or as the Steelers know him as Mapletron, which I don't know why he deserves that nickname because he was never close to Calvin Johnson.
That 1 3-touchdown game.
In any famous, where were you during the 3-touchdown game against the Eagles in 2020 or whatever it was? Speaking of wide receivers, DK Metcalf, man, I mean, I really wish we could avoid your contract. You sat on the couch for 2 weeks, and it appears as though you haven't used the jug machine all year to catch balls. As I said in our preview, in order to expose this defense, Muth had to be involved. That was not the case. We saw that he had one catch for 18 yards, I believe, on a big third down, which we saw live. It was a great catch, picked up a little bit of momentum. I believe we ended up punting on that drive, just negative play after negative play. Jonnu Smith was somehow involved way too much, a net negative this entire year.
I don't know if he got a single pass that wasn't behind the line of scrimmage.
I believe he had 2 receptions for -1 yards. I could be wrong on that, though. But, the under and overutilization by Arthur Smith for certain players, it's just plagued this team all season. Jonnu Smith, you suck. Arthur Smith, you also suck. Austin, you're saved by turnovers. You are a moron. Mike T going – I have some more sympathy, some more grace with him. Obviously, he's brought in Steeler Nation a lot of great victories, a lot of great memories and moments. I can't say the same for Arthur Smith. He's had his ups and downs all season. First of all, the Steelers showed that they are not a serious team. They're not a playoff team. They're not consistent. If it wasn't for Aaron Rodgers, they would not be in the position that they're in, and that's just That's just point blank what it is. Terrell Austin has also not helped. Just the inconsistency on the defensive side of the ball is just it's so apparent and it's so abysmal and awful and just very hard to watch. Going more onto the defense as well and just sort of the team as a whole, I like to think that, Cam Hayward, Aaron Percocet Rogers, and Coach Tomlin, I feel like they've kind of played or coached their last games. I kind of feel like we've seen them, walk out of the stadium all together. It feels like they're sort of a package deal, like a trio. I could very well see Cam retiring. Obviously, Coach T is, gone or going to take a year off or whatever it is. Aaron, considering they're going to probably clear house, I don't think he's going to come back, but maybe he will. And, that's a discussion for another day. Cam has been great all year. He's carried the D line all year, has put up the best stats, all pro, everything like that. Aaron, you no doubt still have the arm ability. We've seen that, and your wide receivers can't get open. We've seen you can throw the ball. However, I think you have less mobility than 311-pound Darnell Washington, who is a tight end and arguably an O lineman and probably our best O lineman. He's not even on the line. So that's very apparent. You look at Aaron in contrast to someone like Fields, for example, way more mobile. Obviously, you take Aaron's arm strength and accuracy over that. But, this day and age, you look at Lamar, you look at Allen, you look at Herbert, you look at Lawrence. These are guys that, like, obviously Lamar more than the other ones, more dual threat, but these are guys that can use their legs. And that's what the league is doing right now. And, like, even Patrick Mahomes, like, he's kind of got some show on him, but he can use his legs. We've seen it. I thought Aaron, disappointing performance, definitely, but at the same time, again, wouldn't be here without him. Didn't really have anyone to throw to. Metcalf was not helping him whatsoever. Adam Thielen had some nice catches. John Smith, just leave, go. But, as a whole, just very, very underwhelming, embarrassing performance.
It was rough. We hung in there in the first half, showed some signs of life. Even on that first drive, we were cheering when we saw Jalen Warren break away for a first down. I think it was on that first run to start the game, and you know, got our hopes up. We knew that the Texans were going to come with a defense that was capable of wrecking this game, and honestly, the complete flip side occurred where our defense was causing turnovers. Where and it's the playoffs. You might have consistencies during the year, but it's the playoffs. If you get a turnover, you need to convert. Whether it's three or seven, you need to convert.
No
And to have as
exceptions.
many, have as no exceptions, and to have as many game-changing plays as we had yesterday, where it almost seemed as though Stroud was serving it to us on a silver platter, and to not convert into points was just unacceptable. And it showed that we squeaked into the playoffs by beating the Ravens in what was an all-time game. You know, we had that little burst of hype because we were able to take down the Ravens, who I think I'm not going to say the Ravens would have put up a better fight against the Texans, but I do think people would have looked at the Ravens a bit differently than they would have with us in the first round, with the potential that they have, with the threat that they kind of have on offense. If Lamar gets healthy, he's able to have that kind of two-dimensional game, being able to throw the ball and then also be explosive with the run. People might have looked at them a little bit differently, whether it was just against the Texans or just in general. But, you know, that was a tough showing in the second half. For Aaron to go out on this year, I think it's unlikely he comes back. With Tomlin going, I can't really see him playing for another coach, just with the relationship that he and Mike T had and how big of a role that was in him coming to Pittsburgh. But for him to go out on a pick six like that, it obviously doesn't taint the career that he's had, because he's had a Hall of Fame career, first ballot, without a doubt. He's been incredible, but tough to see that. And, tough for us to go out that way. Same thing with Cam. Without having Tomlin, it's just hard to see him playing for another coach. I mean, maybe he comes back. He had another all pro season. He's playing really well. Um, playing at a high level. It's almost like he gets better with age, which has been the complete opposite with TJ. But it's just hard to see him playing for another coach that's not named Mike Tomlin. So we'll have to see how this plays out. Obviously, in the coming days, we'll have to see who they retain. Obviously, I would say for sure Danny Smith as our special teams coordinator. I don't see him going anywhere. With the offensive and defensive coordinator, I think both jobs are up in the air. I don't see either of those guys as safe. With how many young guys there are, even at the NCAA level, that are hungry for a job to come in and bring a spark and bring something new, to think that we're going to employ Arthur Smith and Tara Lawson next year, regardless of who you hire as your head coach, does not fill me with much hope. So we'll have to see. It's not uncommon for a team to fire their head coach and then completely clean house. So we'll have to see how it plays out. We have a pretty stubborn ownership and organization, in our team's history. But with Tomlin going, for as low of a chance that I thought that there was of that happening after this year, after he won that game to get us into the playoffs, I think everything is on the table right now. Sometimes you have to get worse before you can get better. And I think, you know, we might have a rough season next year with who we hire as a head coach, just with a year of adjusting to a new organization and to a new cadence with a new team and new coordinators. We'll see who they retain, who they don't. But, you know, we'll have to see how this plays out. I think there's a million different ways that this can go, and I think with Tomlin stepping away and immediately after the loss, it was immediate. The next day, he's
Yep.
out. So we'll have to see how this plays out. But I'm very curious to see, how they go with this search. And I know we've discussed. I really hope they're thorough. I hope they interview all the candidates on the table we were discussing earlier. There's about a quarter of the league right now that's looking for a coach next year. Not that there aren't always a few openings after every year, but there's a lot of guys out there right now who are looking for jobs, and there's a lot of teams looking for jobs too. And the
Yep.
Steelers is a great job. The standard is winning football and competing. Not just competing for a Super Bowl, but competing in general to make the playoffs. So we've been kind of stuck in this purgatory here, and we'll have to see what this next chapter looks like. But I really hope they're thorough, and I hope they look at all the young coordinators out there right now making a name for themselves, looking for head coaching offers, and also, guys that have kind of just been out there looking for jobs and haven't found one yet. So I think there's a lot of guys out there right now. I don't know if you have any thoughts on who your number one candidate would be for this next year, or if you have a few that you like. But I mean, this is a pretty crazy cycle that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, I'm going to be optimistic and hopeful that they will be thorough in that process of picking the next head coach. They've had since '69 or whatever it's been. Noel with 4 Super Bowls, Cowher with one, and Tomlin with another. That's 3 coaches in a really long time. Um, I, I trust Rooney. I only have so much trust though, just because he kind of allowed this for the past 10 years, or maybe a little bit longer that should have gone on. Like you said, a lot of great young candidates. Some of my top options would be someone like Flores as a head coach. But, sort of rebuttal to that is he's also a defensive minded head coach. But then someone could also say, what if you bring an OC like Mike McDaniel or, someone else, one of these young passing coordinators or an OC. So we just have to see that balance. I think our relationship with Flores is a little bit, strained, I guess you could say. So I don't know his willingness or desire to even return to Pittsburgh, but I guess we'll see what happens. And yeah, back to Coach T. It's just run its course, and I think it's best for both sides. And I thank him for the memories. But going back to the game, who would you be your MVP?
It's tough because there aren't that many guys that I feel as though put up an MVP worthy
Performance.
performance. Yeah, I mean it was tough out there. I mean, both running backs were pretty efficient on the low carry numbers that they both have. you know, on the offense, we just really couldn't get it going. We had that one throw to Fryermuth late in the game where he got destroyed on the hit, but was able to come down with the ball. And it was just, where was that earlier in the game? You have to think it goes to someone on the defense. I mean, I would have to say Jack Sawyer showed a lot of potential last night. A lot of potential. And not that he's been bad this year, but he hasn't really had much of an opportunity. He's got Herbig ahead of him. He's got Highsmith and TJ, both of whom were pretty non-existent last night,
Yep.
especially TJ. But, and I think we hold TJ to a higher bar because being paid so much money. It's the same thing with DK. You're demanding that much money. And with DK, we didn't void that guaranteed money with the suspension, which we could have, but we didn't. We honored our money that we promised him, and we chose to stand by our player. And last night, like you were saying, it's like his hands were made of glass. It was just tough to watch on the offense. No one really was put up a great showing. So I would say Jack Sawyer made a great impact, and I'm excited to see what he can do in these next few years. We have a pretty old team right now. I feel like we have a lot of guys where there's going to be a changing of the guard that happens here pretty soon to a new, younger generation. And so to have some guys showing a spark like that, like Jack Sawyer did last night, making the most of his opportunities was promising. And, fills me with hope, especially as we go into this new era with not knowing who our head coach is going to be. And I don't think it's crazy to say, just given that Tomlin's gone, I don't know that either of these coordinators will be coaching this team this year next year. Maybe they will, maybe they'll both be brought back, but I think there's just as easily a chance where both of them, we just completely clean house and we start fresh, which I personally would not be mad about.
Right. I think that's necessary. I think that definitely needs to happen. Like you said, obviously proud of Jack. In TJ's or Nick's absence, he's definitely shown a lot of heart, a lot of passion. We see some tackle for losses against the Lions, some nice tackles against the Browns, and then obviously in this game, helping force that interception for Black to come down with. Very proud of him. There's a lot of potential. These young D linemen, as Cam is sort of heading out the door. Alex is still relatively young. TJ's getting up there, but optimistic. And also Keanu. Keanu made a lot of good plays. Very proud of his performance. And, we draft good D linemen, so we'll see what happens. Definitely optimistic about that. I would say my MVP of the game, honestly, I would just say Cam. I saw him going in and out of the game, injury after injury, and I think he just stuck at it. And I think no one wanted this win more than he did, and it's disappointing we can't give it to him. As much as we joke about him, he's been a leader and a veteran, and just even a Walter Payton Man of the Year. Man, it's just tough. Would have loved to get him a playoff win, but yeah, I think he's kind of heading out the door. But I guess time will tell, and we'll see. And sometime later this week, we'll have another video of who we think the top replacement candidates for this head coach vacancy will be. Remember, like you said, sometimes you got to take one step backwards to take another two steps forward. That's just how it is. That's how this league is. You have to modernize. You have to be willing to modernize. This organization's sort of conservative culture and unwillingness to, modernize and get with the times, I feel like has really set us back a couple years. But I am optimistic for the future. I hope the Rooney family and the Steelers organization can pick, the next guy. Hope he can turn out and be what exactly Steeler Nation needs to get back to our winning ways.
Yeah, I think one last final comment I would make is, you know, we've had only a few coaches in our franchise's history, and Tomlin's been with this team for so long. And what's becoming more common nowadays is these offensive minded coaches. And, the Steelers have been known. I mean, you see the commitment from how much we pay our defense relative to the rest of the league, obviously highest paid, but it's by a margin. And so maybe it's time to kind of switch gears and look for a more offensive minded head coach. Maybe it's time to take a chance on someone. There's a lot of coordinators that are going to be coming off this cycle that are going to be looking for jobs, especially, to name one, the Seahawks offensive coordinator Kubiak
Yep.
is it looks very promising what he's been able to do there. And so, I know that there are some people who are critical of these kind of play calling head coaches, I should say. To give a couple names, Ben Johnson and also Liam Cohen, who've both been tremendously successful in their first years as coaches. But these guys have an energy to them. They're young, they're hungry, and they want it all. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and the types of candidates that we interview. We'll definitely be keeping an eye out for the names. And I think as we have a better sense of who we are interviewing and who we're considering for the job, we'll definitely do more of an in-depth breakdown on each candidate and how we see them fitting in. And if we could see them as a potential fit, and we'll probably provide a more in-depth ranking of each one. But it's still early. I think we're all kind of still processing this news of Tomlin stepping away. To reiterate, we obviously wish him the best. I think if he goes to TV for a year, he will be tremendously successful, tremendously sought after if he doesn't already have a contract waiting for him at Fox, as Schefter had rumored, or anywhere else. But it's obviously an interesting case. given that we own the rights to him. If another team wants him and he goes to TV for a year and wants to come back, go the Sean Payton route, we could get some picks for that. And obviously we have the draft coming up in Pittsburgh this year, so we'll see if we make any splash plays. But this will be an interesting one to follow, and we'll obviously be watching these storylines like a hawk. So we'll definitely make another video soon on some of the candidates out there and how we see them fitting in. But until then, here we go, Steelers. This will be one to watch.